So spoiler alert. Well, the spoiler's already happened, but I'll give you the alert anyway, just as a cautionary. If you don't want to know the end of all things, then close your ears. But in those days after that suffering, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth and the ends of heaven. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. As I said at the beginning of the service, you'd think that the beginning of the church year, the first Sunday in Advent, we'd start with something a little more celebratory. After all, it seems appropriate to start a new season, something new with something celebratory to mark that moment. But of course, as Christians, as people of the way, a way that is often very different than the surrounding culture, we shouldn't be surprised that the start sounds like this. We are, after all, people who start with a cross and then an empty tomb. We start with death and then we go into resurrection. And so beginning our new year this way is no different. We begin our new year with an image of the end of all things. We begin at the end. What a strange place to start. And there is no warning in this reading, is there? We just jump right into it. There are dark moons and falling stars and Jesus coming down in this overwhelming power and glory that can just be felt in the bottom of your soul. And all of God's people are pulled together from wherever they are. They are pulled together in God's arms. And it is a picture of everything falling apart and yet everything coming together at the same time. And after that, we are zoomed back into our present time. We are sort of zoomed forward at first into that end, and then we are pulled back into this moment, and we are told to keep awake with that image ahead of us. It is a paradox in a lot of ways. To get a glimpse of the future and the struggle of the future, but also the joy of being in God's arms and the knowledge that there will be a time when all things will be brought together in perfection, and then zoomed back to here and asked to live in the presence. It reminds me of people who have had these death experiences, who have died and who have seen God and have seen the end and have felt that, and yet are asked to come back and be here among the things that are happening here, which are not always so great. How are we supposed to stay awake when we already know the end of the story, and perhaps in our hearts, and well, I believe in our hearts, long for that ending in some ways? I was down in Vancouver for the 3-day course on social innovation, and what's amazing about that course is that somehow the instructors, both of who are Buddhists, have managed to make some kind of spiritual connection pieces within this course around working in organizations. And one of the exercises that we did was called the lifeboat. And so they invited us into this lifeboat, which was chairs in a circle. And they said, you can come in and you will be choosing life or you will be choosing death in this space. And so everyone asked if they could get some more details, some more description of what was going to happen, of course, and the instructor said, no. If you don't want to be in the center, you can be on the outside and you can watch. You will be a part of it. And so, of course, the sort of outgoing person I am, I had to get into the center. And so we sat in the circle and went around, and each time there were 4 rocks and there were 8 of us. And each time it went around, we could choose to live and explain then why we chose to live, or we could choose to die and pick up a rock and explain why we chose to die. Two of the women, we went around for the first four people. One was a pregnant woman, two younger guys, and two younger women, myself. And first four people chose life. And then we came to the fifth person, and she chose death. And she explained that she felt like she had done what she needed to do, and sure there was more, but she could go. And then that seventh person also chose death, and she said, you know what, I'm drawn to the peace of not having any more of this to worry about. And it came to me, and I initially chose life as well. I thought, no, I have these relationships that I want to hold on to, or that I have things I want to do. And yet as it came around the second time, I had this strange sense from the other two that I actually wanted to fall into that death, not in a morbid, suicidal way, but in a sense of peace and letting go and being with God. And so this went around, and eventually each person struggled with that, with these things. What was interesting was that at the end of all of that peace, is I had this sense of time zooming forward and myself seeing the galaxy and the infinity of God ahead of me. And all of those things that were tying me down disappeared, and the people I knew, they all died. And I went into this space, and it was God, it was infinity. What happens when you've been into that space, or seen that space, or felt that space of love in God, and yet still are asked to come back and be awake and wait? Not so long ago, there was an old man in a little house. He lived there a long time. Sometimes it felt like too long. In his 90s, the old man is feeling his age. I can't go down the stairs into my workshop, he says to himself while sitting in the living room watching TV. I can't drive, he says to himself while looking out the window longingly. I can't go out at night as the street lamps stream onto his bed, the light. I spend most of my time in this little house, he thinks, while looking at the kitchen wall. The house feels a lot smaller now than when his wife had been around. She had died 10 years ago. In fact, he thought to himself, every year the walls seem to close in on me just a little bit more. Why am I still alive? What is the point? If he's honest with himself, he is ready for the end to come. Sitting in church that Sunday, he looks around at a coffee time in a room that is empty, or seats that are left empty from people he had known. There isn't much left for me, he thinks to himself. Why don't you just take me, Lord? The next day, while he's eating his morning porridge, the phone rings. You have an extra room, don't you? His good friend blurts out to him. Sure, the old man says. Well, are you willing to put up a young couple? The wife is pregnant and the husband has just lost his job at the fish processing plant. No, definitely not, he says. It's only for a few weeks, and then they'll find another place, I promise. No, they only need a room to sleep in and a kitchen to make food in. I don't know. That's good enough for me. I'll come over with them later tomorrow. Click. What just happened? The old man thought to himself. Before he knows it, this strange couple is living in his son's bedroom. It's not a big bedroom, but it's enough, and for some reason they seem overjoyed. He can't figure out why. The old man isn't sure what to think of the whole thing. There are strangers living in his house, in his space, however small it is. They say hi in passing, and he runs into them in the kitchen, but really that's it. The man is out most days searching for work, and the woman is usually resting in her room. The doctor says you have to be on bed rest, the old man overhears the husband saying to the woman as he walks by the door on his way to the bedroom one evening. Are these people going to be here forever? The man thinks as he drifts off into a deep sleep. The next morning he wakes up to the clattering of dishes in the kitchen. He slides on his slippers and slowly makes his way down the hallway. The pleasant smell of French toast fills the air and meets him in the hallway as he gets closer to that kitchen. "Good morning," the wife says. "Good morning," the old man says with a hint of confusion. I thought I'd make breakfast, if that's okay with you," she says sheepishly. Too tired to go back to his room, the old man sits down. The French toast is delicious. Every morning after that, the old man wakes up to the clanging of dishes and clattering of pans, and each morning he follows the trails of those smells to the kitchen. Bacon and pancakes and eggs and toast. I haven't eaten this well since... Since when? She asks. He looks down at his plate of eggs and keeps on eating. After 2 months, the baby is born. The crying in the middle of the night isn't as bad as I thought it would be, he thinks to himself. Soon the little girl is walking around the house as he watches his afternoon shows. The husband eventually finds work at the local construction company. 2 months turns into 2 years. The house is much bigger than I remember, the old man thinks to himself as he looks around at the 4 of them sitting at the dinner table together. Lacey and Anthony and even little Tara smile back at him. "How's your dinner, Gary?" "Good," he says. "Very good." And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Keep awake. Keep awake. Can you stay awake, knowing the end of the story? When you're getting close, perhaps, to the end of the story, or you feel like sometimes you may even want the story to end. You may know the end, but you aren't there just yet. You're still here, so stay awake. There's more to come before the end. In fact, we're just getting started. Amen.